Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now then, you're very welcome along. So, very happy to say Mr. Ian McKinley is in studio. Played for Leinster, Zebre, Benetton, Italian international. A new book written with Jerry Thornley, Second Sight, Rugby and Redemption. You're very welcome.
Joe,
good to see
you. As always, a pleasure.
So, I mean, it's always a big undertaking, and Jerry Thornley, I know, great to get him involved. Why was this something that you really wanted to commit to paper and write about? Because you've always struck me as relatively private-ish and low-key in many ways, and you're opening yourself up a touch here.
Yeah, it's certainly a strange experience, very therapeutic, if I'm to be honest. Now, it has taken a while to put everything down on paper, but I think it's just important to share the story because it is quite a unique one, and I just ultimately hope that people take something from the story and show that if you do have a setback in life, and mine just happened to be along the rugby path, that you know that you can achieve what you want to achieve, and you need a little bit of luck and help along the way, but things can be achieved. So again, I hope people take something from it. When
you say therapeutic, just hit me when you said that. Did you ever go to therapy about this ordeal and this trauma?
Funny, people have been asking me, like, whenever it happened, you know, because mental health is such a buzzword at the moment, and such a buzz thing at the moment. Yeah. No, never. Like, it was never a thing. Do you need to speak with someone when it happened? It was just, I was very much of the opinion of, like, just keep working and throw yourself into as many things as possible so that you didn't have to think about it. Yeah. But no, since the book has come out, everyone has started to ask me about that. Yeah. But no, never have.
I guess it was 2010, which is not a lifetime ago. But I think, as you said, the conversation around mental health has even accelerated massively in the last decade. Perhaps if it had happened today, you might have been told, well, you should go and speak to someone, but who knows what the right answer is.
Yeah, potentially, and who knows if it would have helped or not. But I suppose as experience has gone on, probably the way I dealt with it was, I mean, there's different ways you could have gone about it. Probably was not a very effective way, but I think ultimately, you know, it was a traumatic thing, even though I do know it is not the worst thing that can happen. But to me, at the time, having your eyeball burst and then ultimately losing your sight through a rugby injury, like that's your sort of dreams are dashed and everything like that. So it was definitely seen as a death in our family ultimately.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll get into the story in a moment, but I suppose I'm sure you've been thinking about it over the last couple of days as you've seen the book thrown out into the public, and you've talked about it with various people. What effect do you think the whole mad, awful ordeal, the last 12 years, what effect do you think it's had on you as a person? How do you think it's shaped you?
Yeah, it's a pretty good question, Joe. You've gone in pretty heavy on that one.
Well, but you were only 20 when it happened, so
yeah, you know. Well, certainly there's negative and positive things. So the negative things would be, you know, driving is difficult, particularly in Ireland here on the different side of the road. In Italy, it was actually easier because it was just easier being on the other side of the road there, being in busy places. So airports, shopping centres would bump into people quite a lot. And yeah, your skill set is put under huge amount of pressure in terms of your depth perception, being left-footed, kicking off your left foot, sometimes not seeing the ball, goggles being an issue and all that sort of stuff. The positive side of that was got to experience a different culture of rugby, which was fantastic, also difficult. You just got to experience the different side of life and rugby in that sense, and then having got involved in different projects. I think as a professional rugby player, you know, you're very privileged to be in that position, but you're in a very small percentage in the global rugby market, as it were. And now to been able to experience visually impaired rugby, mixed ability rugby, the other side of it has been very fulfilling. Now, whether that would have happened because of the injury, I don't know, but so I'd say that there's positives and negatives, definitely.
It's interesting when I asked you there what effect you think it's had on you as a person. You went for the superficial stuff, whereas what I'm wondering is, this had the potential to make you angry, bitter, resentful, maybe a more complete person, a more spiritual person. On that maybe deeper level, do you think it's had any profound effect on you, or would you be a pretty similar person?
No, it of course it has. I think if I wasn't able to experience the 6 years with the goggles through, the lower ends of Italian rugby up till international, if I didn't experience that, the highs and lows of what it was to be a true professional, even though I was training as a professional growing up through Leinster and Irish under-20s and all that, but to try and create your own path, if I didn't have that, I'd be immensely bitter. And I was bitter, probably not a very nice person to be around in terms of short, snappy responses when I retired. And probably my family, friends, my girlfriend, now wife, probably bear the brunt of that. And that's not the type of person that you want to be, and you don't want people to be around you in that scenario. So thankfully that didn't happen, because I could see it as a snowball effect, and that's probably why I ended up having a breakdown with my brother, because it was just all this build-up of emotion, and for that I can never sort of repay him and my family, but ultimately I think it shaped me in a good way, because you experience different things. How could it not?
Yes, yeah. The book jumps right in. Let's not dance around the book. Like let's address what happens, and it does that straight away. So January 2010, you had just turned 20 the previous December, so you're still a kid really, and it's UCD against Lansdowne, and even the way you describe it, it's so sudden. I guess that's the mad thing about so many life-changing moments, car accidents, something like this. It's just so sudden and unexpected, and you just say on the ground, something catches your face, and boom, left eye, everything's black. And then there is the sentence, as you referenced a moment ago, standalone sentence, my eyeball has just burst. So that's a shocking moment. There's a trip to Vincent's where your brother Philip is told Ian's just lost his eye, and he tries to stay calm in amidst that awfulness, and so it's, well, we need to get over to the eye and ear hospital. And on that drive you decide to have a look at it in the car. I can't say I would have. I understand the grim curiosity, but you said I need to have a look at this, much to the horror of Philip and anyone there saying please don't look at it. Is that memory fairly etched on the brain?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the reason I wanted to look at it, so I'm fairly matter of fact, whether it's good or bad. I think the reaction from the other patients in Vincent's made me decide to do it, because there was shock in their faces. You can imagine I'm there, my brother, he's got his arm wrapped around me. I've got the big rugby jacket. I've got my UCD kit on. Still have my boots on here. Clank, clank, clank across the.
You're turning heads to begin with.
Pretty much, and you just have these people. Like I'm not joking. Turning and looking at you, or stopping what they're doing and looking at you, because the eye, you can physically see. Obviously, my eye is very cloudy now. Yeah. As time has gone on, but it was a heck of a lot worse than what it was, and out of its socket and all that sort of stuff. So it was just that curiosity of just making sure I knew what I was dealing with, and my response, which I have put in the book, was very blasé. And I think obviously Mum, been in the car as well, because she came to pick us up, was sort of horrified at how blasé I was. Maybe that was because I was so young. I don't know. You don't really appreciate the severity of what's happening.
It struck me as total shock.
Probably.
I don't think you were processing what you were seeing.
No, and I think when I saw the junior doctor in the eye and ear, like I really felt sorry for her, because she took one look and was just like, I'll be back in a minute.
Yes.
Like clearly had no...
There was a real, this is above my pay grade moment for her.
And I felt really bad for her, like really did. But then I think that shock turned into sadness then, when you're just left alone and you're left with your own thoughts. And when you're talking about the suddenness of everything, like you were suddenly now brought down to your knees. Like you're suddenly here now in a hospital room, and it was still dark. Like they didn't turn on the lights or anything. So you're just literally sitting in the dark, like wondering
for 45 minutes.
Yeah, wondering what is going on here. So yeah, everything happens so quickly.
Yeah. Surgery happens. It's 4 hours. It's an ordeal, obviously, and a couple of things in the immediate aftermath. One, the video of the incident is reviewed, and it turns out that the stud belonged to one of your teammates, which is a relief. You didn't want, I suspect, the never-ending suspicion of, well, was that deliberate, which would be trickier, I suppose, to park and leave behind.
massively, and we were really relieved because for anyone that's played rugby, you know the difference between a full-on stamp and a backwards motion. Rucking obviously is not as to the front now as previous years, but you definitely get a sense of what the action or the differences of the action is. So thankfully there was a blue sock, and we later found out who it was and all that sort of stuff. So
he wrote you a letter?
Yeah, he was very gracious and came to visit me. I don't know if I would, because he's also been put in a tricky situation, and he's probably sick to death of hearing the story at this stage, and he has to carry that, I suppose, as well with him. But that's just part of the story, and he showed a lot of courage in what he did. But again, I think my family thought I should scream or shout at him, and again, whether it was just the not processing part of the whole thing, but it was just, when you're injured, you just try and get back as quick as possible. Leinster is so competitive, and you're in the era of Contaponi had just gone. Johnny's obviously on the start of his incredible path, even though he'd played before, but he would just his trajectory he was just moving up so quickly, and everyone else coming in, so you just couldn't waste time. You couldn't waste time, and you just needed to get back as quick as possible, and that honestly was my thought process.
And I guess you've never seen the video of the incident. Is there any sense that your teammate, while he absolutely was not trying to injure a fellow teammate, was careless? Does that keep you up at times?
Yeah, well, people ask, do you wish it never happened, or how do you feel to wish it never happened? I can never give a definitive answer about that. Was it clumsy? Yeah, of course. But everything is such a split second. Like you're talking about a ripping motion from one side on your back to then his foot connecting with a face, stud with an eyeball. How many times do you see players coming off with cuts above their eye, under their eye, and it just so happened that this time it just went a little bit further. So yeah, it was clumsy.
How quickly did you get from the why me stage to the what you've just outlined, which that can happen and it's unlucky? Because you're entitled to a fair degree of how bloody unlucky was I? I
think I went straight away to that, so I didn't feel any why me. It was the why me later on.
Okay.
So when I retired and moved away to Italy, and all that sort of emotion was building up, and being sort of powerless to not compete and see other guys winning matches and earning caps and winning trophies and all that sort of stuff, that was the stuff that I wasn't in control of. And that really hurt.
Your recovery from that initial awful moment is really very good, especially when you think that your brother was told at Vincent's, well, the vision's gone, the eye's probably gone. So it surprises everybody, it pleases everybody. You are absolutely militant about sleeping upright, putting in your drops. You just follow everything to the letter of the law, and you do get back. You are part of Leinster, and you've been given a full Leinster academy straight out of school, which was not something afforded to many Leaving Cert students, not least from a school like St Columba's, which doesn't have massive rugby pedigree. And so you're in amongst it. Joe Schmidt is your coach. You are training with these guys. Again, where were you then? 70% vision, would you say, in the eye?
So yeah, whenever I got back, which was 6 months after the injury, got 50%. So what that would have looked like was you could see blurry figures, but that then generated to outlines of players, but it was still very, very hazy. But I got up about 70% throughout the season.
Yeah, which was remarkable. And again, you're around such legends. Like at one point, there's a little paragraph dedicated to just how damn good Ethan Asewa is on every front. It won't surprise anyone. It's not breaking news, but you even say if maybe you were quietly to get Joe Schmidt and ask him who's the best player you coached, you had have a stab that it might be Nasewa.
Like unbelievable player, like so natural. He could play any position. His mind just worked in a different way. Always usually made the right call. Been fortunate enough to play with him and against him. Geez, you'd much rather play with him, like honestly. And I think now that whenever you've left or you've stepped back a bit to realise the caliber of player that you were with at the time there, like really fortunate to have played under coaches like Checa and Schmidt, and to have O'Driscoll and Sexton, all these, Rocky Elson when he was there, like, I mean, that's, you know, fairy tale stuff, but you were in that environment to compete and to compete for positions. So as I said, this was a huge speed bump that needed to be got over pretty quickly.
It's interesting as well that in that period there, you're at the centre of gouging incidents, and there's one exchange where somebody has a finger near your eye, and your teammates all rally around, and one of them shouts, you know, do you not know what's happened to this guy? And his response was, well, I broke my leg last year, you don't hear me complaining about it. So some real gents out there who really welcomed you back into the fold.
That was my third game back as well, so, you know, yeah, I suppose the reason
disgrace, you know, there's no other word for it.
It's an absolute disgrace, and you don't want that in the game. And you know, I felt it was really important to have that in the book, because that is the reason ultimately how or why you use the goggles. I mean, people did think the goggles enhance your vision, they help with certain elements. They certainly didn't, but it was just to have that protection to make sure nothing happened to my right eye. You don't want any boots, you know, any more studs flying in that area. You don't want any fingers going near that area. So it was just to stop that. But that incident, was terrible. Would not wish it upon anyone. And like, my teammates rallied around me pretty quickly, and it was just sort of done. That was it.
So as you're in and around the Leinster fold, and you're playing a couple of games here and there, and your vision is coming back, ultimately there's a detached retina, and the sight in your eye can't be saved, and that doesn't seem to happen from an incident. That's just, you're on a weekend away with some friends and it just happens in the car. Would you have been told or had the sense that there's a ticking time bomb here and you are definitely going to lose sight in your left eye, or at that stage were you pretty optimistic?
So what I was always told from the surgeons, that a cataract would develop, so that was a guarantee. So that came about, was it about, say, 14 months or so? That's a rough guide after the initial accident. So cataract, most people think it's quick. Local anaesthetic, 15 minutes, you're in and out, onto the next patient. Because my eye had burst, you're dealing with a different type of eye, different size. It's sort of a bit more complicated. So I had a couple of surgeries which just didn't... There was a huge amount of blood in the eye as well that was resting. It just didn't move. Blood flow, for whatever reason, just wasn't working like it should do. So the vision just wasn't improving at all. So it was just a random weekend away with friends, and you know, the doctor, had numerous conversations to make sure you're going back in as safe a manner as possible. I think it was strange for them as well, because it's not really an injury that, to my knowledge anyway, had happened. So in some ways they had to be sure that I was confident and comfortable and that we were doing the right thing, and every stage was followed with immense accuracy, and I didn't want to go outside the parameters because it is so delicate. So just that random weekend away in Galway, and then next thing, just black, and it was always told, if that happens, get in as quick as possible. And then ultimately the surgeon, the retina specialist, was speaking to my parents, and the reason I was saying that the book was quite therapeutic is that there's things that I didn't find out. So you mentioned Philip. I didn't know he was told. The doctor in St. Vincent said that eye is gone. I didn't know. My parents were told Ian's sight is gone the night before, but because I was in post-op, I couldn't be told, all those certain things. So you're sort of discovering things along the way that you didn't necessarily know, maybe, to be protected. But ultimately the surgeon said it was like, performing a surgery on wet tissue paper, that you just couldn't...
Nothing to work with. So that was, dreams and aspirations of making a full recovery, which didn't make a full recovery, but pretty close. You had all that hopes, aspirations, and ultimately, pretty devastation. As an aside, when you're chatting with your family and as part of this book to glean what you can from the time, are the conversations kind of casual and I didn't realise that, and kind of light, or have they been quite heavy?
Both.
And upsetting? I
think it's more difficult for certainly my mum. Been very difficult for her. She found it very, very hard.
You're a father now, or can you imagine?
Yeah, you definitely can. I can see if my son now, if that happened and he wanted to go back, I'd have a lot of reservations. But they knew that's just what I wanted to do, and you only sort of get one. Well, I got two, I suppose, cracks at it, but you really just got to give it your all. So no, I would say both on that front. Like, I mean, there's some lighthearted moments when, you know, dad brings the wrong brings a toothbrush for a child, and you know, you try and mix it up a little bit, but that's I'm trying to be as open and honest as there were lighthearted moments, but then there were the very serious you know, hand in your head sort of moments.
I mean, I think in some ways one of the saddest moments of the whole ordeal is after this news and the site's gone and it's not coming back, and you know retirement is imminent. You go into Leinster anyway, and you get the season photo shoot, which is obviously the start of the season. Everybody gets their pen picks for the year, and even though you knew you were not going to be part of that year, you say, well, I'm going in, I'm putting on the jersey, I'm getting the photo. So there's, I think, a lot going on in that.
Yeah, and I probably still don't know why, but I mean, I just wanted to have, that was when I was signed as a full professional. So, you know, Leinster had 2 Heineken Cups, the 2 stars in the jersey, and it was a new season. And I could definitely feel when I went into Riverview, where we were based at the time, lads just probably felt a bit of pity for you. And that's actually a feeling that has sort of stayed with me. Now, that's not a criticism in any way. That just was a natural feeling. I'm sure guys,
pity not the appropriate.
Well, you know, I mean, I just wanted the photo. Like, I just wanted to go, well, here's Ian McKinley. He made it as a professional rugby player, and he made it with Leinster, his home province, and one of the best teams in Europe.
Yes, full contract.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's stuff of dreams, and worked my ass off to get it, you know, and I wasn't gonna let it go easy. So that's why the decision to retire at 21 was excruciating, and one of the hardest things you're ever going to do. But like, the eye was so sore, thinking that, you know, playing with one eye at an elite level was difficult, and the gouging incidents, they were sort of the 3 things that all came back to me as to why it probably wasn't the wisest thing to go back to.
Yeah. I half wondered, did you smile in that photo?
I don't think you smile anyway.
Okay, it's a stern, I'm a tough rugby player look.
It's a pretty stern,
Okay.
yeah.
Would have been hard to muster a smile, I would have thought.
Yeah, and my eye was sort of, like, people say to me, you wouldn't notice your eye, but I certainly do. It's gammy, like, it's red, and the eyeball is skewed, and after, you know, most recent surgery, so it's obvious that something has you know, recently taken place. But again, it was just to have that new Leinster jersey on. You're part of the senior panel, and you would have been in the programme for the year as a first team player rather than an academy.
Did you feel self-conscious about how it looked? Was that difficult? Did you?
No, it actually looked fine. It looks a lot worse than it is now, but you know, kids can be in your face as well, and you sort of have to learn to adapt to certain responses. You can maybe make up cool sort of stories that you were fighting a great white shark in South Africa or something like that. But it's a good conversation starter as well, I often find. But listen, I got a fake eye cover for my wedding because I said I didn't want to look at photos of a guy with a gammy eye in my wedding photos. Right. But now that I'm married, I don't really care anymore. So I don't have to impress.
We're all in decline anyway.
Exactly.
So then the Italian experience comes, and you take a coaching job, and there's a certain enjoyment in it, but there's I suppose a build up of what you're talking about and describing, the sense of loss, the why me, I think from reading the book, it seemed like the reality of your situation started to really sink in, and your brother Philip, who we mentioned, and his partner Julie came to visit you, and it's a train journey, and you're not in great form anyway. It's one of the reasons you're taking the train, because you're too grumpy to drive, and you do that natural thing, which you check your phone and you see Wasps 28, Leinster 48 in the Heineken Champions Cup, and what's more, it's a whole bunch of your contemporaries who are doing it for Leinster in Europe. And to underline it all, it's Ian Madigan with 28 points, and your careers have paralleled each other. You've known each other a long time. It's a good relationship, but it's also a rivalry. And here's Ian getting 28 points, and you're stuck in a train on a trip you don't want to be on. I think it probably hits you then. I've got like 12 more years of this, of like these guys doing it for Leinster. I'm like trapped. This is torture, and it's on that walk subsequently that afternoon with your brother where it's just a breakdown that I'm not coping with this, I think.
You hit the nail on the head that it just felt like this pressure was just building the whole time, and whether because I hadn't seen my family in a little while, Philip just happened to be the one, because he's the closest one to me in terms of age in my family. Whether that was the reason, I don't know, but I think you hit the nail on the head with another 12 years of this.
Yeah.
Like you can't keep going on being angry every weekend when the team has been picked, the team plays, and almost potentially being happy when the team doesn't do well, whether that's an Irish team or a Leinster team or whatever. That's not a healthy way to live. And that's the guys that were in my age category. They're going on to do create their own path, and they're performing really well. And as you said, like, I'm stuck here learning about James Joyce and Trieste. Like, it's not what I want to do. I want to be there on a Saturday afternoon, bumps and bruises, playing a game of rugby. So probably, yeah, it was just a combination of things. And I don't even know if it was that game, but when I look back now at the actual who was playing on the team, I think it makes sense, because there's so many of the guys that I was growing up with and had played with, like Leo Cullen and Issa and all these guys, and you go, well, that could have been me, it should be me.
Yeah.
And there was nothing ever against Ian. Like, Ian's a fantastic player, he's gone on to do good things, and but it definitely hit home more just because we'd played Gaelic football together at such a young age, and it just was so close. And then I think my brother said it to me, and like, it was so true as well. Like, Joe was going to go on to be Irish coach, so then you're seeing it at a different level altogether at international stage, and you're just going, I can't deal with it. So whether it was just a whole snowball effect happened, but it definitely wasn't just that game. But
no,
it just yeah. But thank God I did cry and break down in front of him, because that's what he needed. My brother needed to see in order to help me, because I wasn't going to say anything.
And so he does a great thing. He starts, well, let's look into every avenue we can, and you come up with the goggles, and you take baby steps, and it seems to work. And as you said, it's protective. Like, people could have from afar have thought, is the prescription? Is there stuff going on there? It was purely protection. You still had no sight in your left eye. Like, you do say it's interesting. You say, well, during my career I was asked all the time, well, how do you play with vision in one eye? You're like, well, I'm not going to tell you the truth, because no coach in his right mind will pick me if I tell you how bad it is. Yeah. I guess you're free to talk about that now. Like, one thing that jumped out at me, you're a left-footed number 10, you've lost the vision in your left eye, and you say that your favourite and most effective kick is the spiral. Yeah. And yet, when you're dropping the ball on your foot, sometimes you can't see the ball. And that's not good. I'm no expert. Yeah, but that's not ideal.
Sometimes, yeah. And
in a way, it's worse that you don't know when you will and when you won't.
Well, I mean, it's because things happen in such an instant as well. Like, I mean, you do train yourself to try go through, I suppose, the same sort of routine and everything like that. But it wasn't just sort of honing in on the skill. Like, you were honing in on the skill, one with a visual impairment and two with the goggles. Yeah. So you were almost having to do triple the amount of work for getting the skill. Of course, I was never going to say to a coach, I can't see in the rain. Yeah. Certain floodlights, if I play in the sports ground, or not even the sports ground, Rodney Parade, for anyone that's played there, the lights are slightly lower, at a lower level. Right. And they're a nightmare to play with the glare with the goggles made it that much more difficult. So you were finding out everything. Everywhere you played, you were finding out something different, but you just had to work that much harder. But you couldn't ever give a coach, I know you had to be open and honest to a certain degree, but you couldn't give away everything. No. Because otherwise, if you've Italy against Scotland 2019 Six Nations, I know they beat us, but if the game was 2022 in Murrayfield and you've 2 minutes to go and out half's injured, Ian, we need to put you on, are you going to fully put your faith in that person? Which I can understand is a very difficult position for a coach, but that's why you just tried to get rid of all those negatives associated with it and try and look at, well, this is what I can do with them. Because I think if you started going with a negative attitude and saying I can't do this with the goggles, then it just would never have materialised, and it wouldn't have, you wouldn't have played nearly 150 games with them.
So the nighttime issue is an issue. Rain is obviously an issue. Like, there's no window wipers in these goggles. Like, if it's raining, it's raining. It's like, best of luck. So how do you, what are you relying on instinct for half of this? I don't know how you're doing this, really.
Well, call the forwards around the corner and a box kick from 9.
Okay.
That's honestly the easiest way to get rid of it. And if you have a good kick in 15, you just say, listen, just split the field, and we'll always play to, because I would be on the left side, you can kick. We did it with Treviso a lot. Split the field and just say, just play back right and kick. Okay. But yeah, it was very frustrating because you were, playing in Twickenham, and the first half an hour is fine, then drizzle comes, and you've got Billy Vunipola that's running down your channel, and you can maybe see one leg of Billy properly, or a ball is past you and you can't catch it as you want to. So those sort of things are hugely frustrating, but I could never fall out of love with them, because ultimately that's what got me there. Like, that's what gave me the confidence to, it was a real love-hate relationship ultimately, but I always had to keep reminding myself that because of them, you were there on the pitch. But certainly certain things were very difficult and challenging, and you'd be looking at the weather constantly, making sure
obsessively,
which is not, your process for thinking. You should be thinking on performance, and I did, but you'd also with you'd be looking at the weather and stuff, which is not, your energy's going into something that potentially shouldn't be.
No, sure. Yeah. And you do say as well, like, I can't see my inside defender quite a bit as well. So did you have to adapt? Are you turning your head a lot more and scanning a lot more than you would have been otherwise, and making all those adaptations?
You try different things, or I tried different things. So my mum would always make comment when she watched me play at live games that it would look like you've got a fly, even though one fly did actually get in during one of my pre-season games, but literally you would have a fly constantly in your goggles because you're just shaking your head. Okay. And that's sort of to just scan everything as much as possible. Now, you can look too much, but I sort of had to, and maybe had to turn my head a little bit going up to defend. But listen, where there's a will, there's a way. But certainly things were tricky, and the levels that you went up, those things were exploited a little bit more. Mightn't have been obvious, but if you miss half a step at international rugby, it's a different ball game to a European game or a URC game.
Yes, those split seconds of time.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a difference when you've got Johnny Sexton coming at you, Farrell, Dan Bigger, rather than say a URC standard game course.
Yeah, I'm sure. But still, I mean, remarkably, you kind of pull it off and you get into the Italy side, and like, your debut for Italy is just a dream. Must be a lovely memory when you're talking about the bitter person you could have become. I would think memories like the memory of your Italy debut against Fiji must be like a balm over whatever could have put.
I mean, it's a good way of putting it. It really is, because I suppose an ex-Italian international came in the changing room afterwards and said, you're in a very rare group who's got their first cap and actually won their first game with Italy. But no, it was hugely significant, I think, because it just sort of elevated everything a bit more, and it was a reward actually for all the hard work that had gone in from my family, friends, people who had supported, and it was, the icing on the cake was winning, because I mean, I suppose as a kid growing up, I mean, I'm looking here at a range of green jerseys here. That was your dream as a kid. Well, that was what my dream was, and you wanted to be in Lansdowne Road, meeting the president, shaking the hand, singing Our Own Vie, and generally beating England. That was the big dream. Now my dream had shifted to a blue jersey. I was in the south of Italy, singing the Italian national anthem, playing against the white jersey of Fiji, and I couldn't have been happier or more proud. And listen, people will argue about the residency rule and all that sort of stuff, and Italy was there whenever I needed them, and they gave me an opportunity to play not only international, even though you had to work your butt off to get there, but even Italy signing up, being the first nation to sign up to the goggles and all the club stuff, and taking a leap of faith. I mean, that's not, I remember when I first played or started playing with Rugby Viadana, who play in like the Eccellenza, so it's like the top 10 of Italian club rugby, and one of the S&C trainers there just said, I was really worried when I heard that there was a half-blind goggle wearing out half coming from the lowest level of Italian rugby, but now that I've seen you play, I'm happy that you're here. you know, if you're hearing the description of it, I can imagine it is not the easiest thing, and definitely a leap of faith from every team that signed me up. But that's what I would have hoped. The performances, you know, would have meant that you were good enough to be there.
Yes, that description doesn't, I suspect, spark a bidding frenzy across European rugby. We must have him.
Absolutely not. I don't think the French clubs will be coming looking for me anytime soon.
What struck me in our limited interactions, in fairness, I pretend that we spent hours and hours together, but even in the Virgin Studios, is the affinity you have for Italian rugby is incredibly genuine, and when that anthem is on, you're singing that anthem, and it's
probably badly.
Well, I can't tell. It seems okay.
No allowed to tune.
Oh yeah, of course, naturally. But well, I mean, that's a rugby player's MO, isn't it?
Exactly.
But it's a genuine affinity. It's something very real for you. It has been far more than a marriage of convenience.
Yeah, absolutely, because they were there for me, honestly, and it's, you know, it's not a romantic thing that I'm trying to look after or go towards or anything like that. It is genuine, and like, I'm really passionate about Italian rugby. Ireland are in a really good space, and of course I'll always support Ireland. I mean, there's no question about that.
Sure.
But I always love underdog stories as well, and Italy just always get bad press. And of course, when you go through a 30 plus game losing streak in the Six Nations, of course, and I was part of those games, it's hard. And some of the games where we've sat with them, Joe, like, have been really tough to watch. But being there for nearly a decade, I can see enough talent to make me believe that Italy can be, I'm not saying a force in rugby, you know, in the future, but can be competitive year in, year out. And I'm hugely passionate about that. Would love to move back. I'm back in Ireland at the moment, but I would never want that door to be closed, because I really do. In some ways, it was a sort of a, you know, your second coming and a different life. You're almost known as, here in Ireland, in whatever rugby circles you might meet, people maybe felt sorry for you because of what happened or what could have been. Now, you never know what could have happened. Another injury could have happened. Sure. Form, you just don't know. But over there, I was Ian McKinley, the rugby player, and goggles, no goggles, that's who I was. And it was really nice feeling to be known as that.
Yeah, I'll bet it was, yeah. So I know you would have desperately loved to go to the World Cup in 2019, and it didn't quite happen. You didn't get the nod, and after that, the club career, I guess, in the way that rugby community ruthless, it was
petered out.
We're
almost
moving
well,
on, and then COVID hits, and then it's, I guess, into your second retirement, and life now is newborn son and building a house, and that aspiration, I think, to get back to Italy someday and to get into coaching. You're still so young. I mean, that's the other, you're 32. Yeah. So, you know, the world's your oyster still, and coaching is on the horizon, you hope.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, I retired again at 31, and a lot of people would have said, why? Like, I mean, you have so many years ahead of you, considering you had essentially a 3-year break in the middle of it as well. And yeah, it is one way to look at it, but the biggest thing for me was at 21, the decision was taken out of my hands. So at 31, listen, I got to experience 6 years with the goggles. As I said, nearly 150 odd games played with them. I got to experience the highs and lows. I was going out on my own terms.
Okay, that was important.
Hugely important. And I didn't want a scenario where, you know, you were going to America for 1 year, Japan for 2 years, maybe you get another contract in England. And I spoke to clubs, and you know, just things for me just didn't seem to fit, and I just thought that I wanted to stop at the highest level I could and be at peace with that, and I really am. Even though it was really difficult doing it twice, like doing it once is hard enough, doing it twice, it was really hard, and nobody can ever prepare you. You can never be prepared for it. It is the hardest thing any sports person will ever do, but I feel like I've got the tools now at 31 to be able to do it, whereas at 21 I couldn't deal with it at all. So I'm very much at peace with it. Even though you miss, how can you not miss, you know, having some of your best mates playing in and out, week in, week out.
You'd miss that if you retired at 38 as well.
Of course, yeah.
So proud?
I'm very proud that there's around 2,500 people that are registered with the goggles. So going, apart from my story, the sort of global element of it is that of sort of found myself involved with the visually impaired world, and to still get messages from people is hugely humbling. And whenever times were tough, you'd be up playing against Ulster and you couldn't see, it was mentioning in Twickenham, bit of drizzle, and you'd struggle. You'd get messages from people to say, my son, daughter, auntie, uncle, whatever is playing rugby because of what you've helped with. And that's sort of the biggest, or the proudest moment, I suppose, of all of it. That goes above and beyond anything I suppose I could have done as a player. And I would hope that sort of helps people and gives people hope. And I would want people, a visually impaired rugby player, playing more times than 9 at international level, to show that it can be done, and push the barriers, the limits. And but I'm just very fortunate that I was able to carry out my career, I suppose, in the way that I wanted to.
Okay. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsor of the Irish rugby team, Team of Us, everyone in. Ian McKinley with us here in studio. The book is Second Sight, Rugby and Redemption. Pleasure as always.
Joe, thanks very much as always.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the Team of Us.